It's 6 p.m. on a Tuesday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's start with the headlines. Seoul and Tokyo sat down for talks on the issue of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of women, raising hopes for a resolution. Unfortunately, the two sides came away empty-handed again. It's a race against time to redraw the nation's electoral map as registration for the April general elections has already begun, but rival parties can't seem to see eye to eye on the details. A further depreciation of the Chinese yuan is seen by many analysts as an attempt to manage the currency's weakness against the greenback ahead of a widely expected U.S. rate hike. The downside is that if it could trigger competitive currency devaluations. Seoul and Tokyo have once again failed to reach agreement on the unresolved issue of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of tens of thousands of Korean women during talks earlier today. A disappointing outcome as it was likely the last such meeting this year, and time is running out for the surviving victims to get what they've long deserved. Kwon So-hwa has our top story.
It was already the 11th round of talks meant to get South Korea and Japan on the same page toward resolving the issue of Japan's sexual enslavement of Korean women during World War II. But at Tuesday's meeting in Tokyo, the two sides failed once again to find common ground. Seoul's Foreign Ministry's Northeast Asian Bureau Chief Lee Sang-duk, Korea's representative to the talks, told reporters after the meeting with his Japanese counterpart Kimihiro Ishikane that at this stage it was difficult to say that the talks were productive, but also hard to say they were not.
Seoul wants to see an early conclusion of the negotiations, but whether another round can be held this year has to be analyzed once the delegation returns to Korea.
While Seoul has been pushing for a formal apology and compensation from Japan for the sexual enslavement of Korean women by the Japanese military during the Second World War, Japan wants to approach the issue on a purely humanitarian level. Tokyo claims that the issue was settled under a 1965 bilateral treaty that normalized relations between the two countries. Despite the fact there has been no major progress on the matter since the first talks were held in April last year, expectations for Tuesday's meeting were higher than usual. And that's because the meeting came just 2 weeks before the end of the year and after President Park Geun-hye had called for greater momentum toward a resolution by the end of this year during her first summit with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in November. Even if Japan does apologize, only 46 out of the 238 Korean victims registered as so-called comfort women are still alive today to hear that apology after one of them died earlier this month. Kwon So-hwa, Arirang News.
In local politics, with candidates already beginning to register for next April's general election, lawmakers from Korea's rival parties frantically try to reach a compromise on how to redraw the electoral map. But according to our Ji Myung-gil, those talks could drag on until the end of the year. Take a look.
Korea's two main rival parties wrapped up another round of talks on redrawing the nation's electoral map without a solution. The ruling Saenuri Party slammed the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy for the failure.
If the NPAD doesn't want to be remembered as the worst political party ever, they'd better work towards progress on the redistricting issue. The issue must be resolved to make it easier for newcomers planning to run in the general elections next year.
There is concern that those who participated in early candidate registration on Tuesday could be at a disadvantage in launching their campaigns. If they register their candidacies in areas subject to redistricting, their campaigns could be invalidated when the electoral map changes. Earlier in the day, National Assembly Speaker Chung Lee-hwa had called a meeting of rival party leaders in an effort to move them toward a compromise. Calling the matter a legislative emergency, he indicated he would step in if the parties fail to find a solution by the end of the year. The NPAD objected immediately, saying he had overreached.
It wouldn't be right for Speaker Chung to exercise his authority to resolve the restricting issue that goes against the principle of parliamentary sovereignty.
The redistricting issue arose following a ruling by the Constitutional Court last year that said the current electoral map is unconstitutional because it perpetuates unequal representation due to changes in the population. The main sticking point between the rival parties is whether or not to decrease the number of proportional representatives. The only thing they've agreed on so far is to keep the number of assembly seats at the current 300. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Staying in the political arena, Ahn Cheol-soo is making his way around Korea to drum up support for his plans to start his own party. Pundits predict at least 10 lawmakers will defect from the party he gave up on, the NPAD, and join him. But Ahn says he's also looking for fresh faces with a passion for reform. Lee Soo-eun has the latest on the politician's bold attempt to go at it alone.
Former opposition leader Ahn Cheol-soo has already taken his political comeback tour on the road, following his departure from the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy party. On Tuesday, Ahn traveled to Korea's southern port city of Busan, where he told local reporters he's seeking to build a new party of talented individuals, even if they lean conservative, as long as they're interested in his reform agenda and fulfill 3 criteria: be against corruption, self-contradiction, and extreme conservatism. Last Sunday, Ahn quit the party he co-founded after his efforts to reform the party and get the current leader Moon Jae-in to resign failed to gain momentum. While it's unclear what effect his departure will have on the political landscape, new polling suggests that it could spell trouble for the opposition, which suffered crushing defeats in the last 2 by-elections. In a nationwide poll by local polling agency Realmeter regarding Ahn's departure from the NPAD, almost half of the respondents said they approved of his decision. However, in the southern provinces of Jeollabuk-do and Jeollanam-do, considered a hotbed of support for the liberal camp, the positive response fell short of 35%. Analysts say that the result illustrates a regional concern over a potential splitting of the liberal vote that could lead to defeat in next year's general elections in April. Lee Soo-eun, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories, the highest-ranking official in the U.S. military says Washington needs to prepare to fight trans-regional, multi-domain, and multifunctional conflicts. Speaking at a U.S. defense conference in Washington on Monday, local time, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford, emphasized that North Korea's ballistic missile capabilities development has started to affect other regional actors such as Japan. Dunford stressed that Pyongyang's ICBM technology as well as its cyber and space capabilities have made the regime a multifaceted threat. He highlighted the U.S. must boost efforts to ensure it is optimally prepared for the fight. China's currency, the yuan, currently hit a 4.5-year low against the U.S. dollar, and with the policies Beijing has instituted, it is expected to keep on weakening. Kim Min-ji explains how this trend could hurt Korea's exporters.
Will the Chinese yuan depreciate further down the road? According to a Bloomberg survey of 64 foreign investment banks, the yuan is expected to trade at an average of 6.61 against the US dollar at the end of next year. That means on year, the Chinese currency is forecast to lose 2.3% of its value. On Tuesday, the yuan weakened against the dollar after the central bank set its official midpoint at its lowest level in more than 4 years. China also announced that it intends to depeg the currency from the dollar and instead link it to a basket of 13 currencies, including the dollar, euro, and yen, which would give it room to fall further. The move is widely seen as an attempt to manage the yuan's value against the greenback ahead of a widely expected U.S. rate hike this week, as a stronger dollar would in turn raise the value of the yuan. But some analysts warn that a further decline in the yuan's value could hurt countries that compete with China on the trade front and push other nations to weaken their currencies in order to keep up.
If the yuan weakens further, it will reduce exports to China, as well as hurt the price competitiveness of exporters that compete with China. It could also push other countries to devalue their currencies, including Korea.
Analysts add that while China is expected to maintain its loose monetary policy, it won't intervene in devaluing its currency, so while the yuan is expected to maintain its downward slide, there won't be any drastic drops. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Korea's finance minister has emphasized the important role the nation's corporate sector has in boosting Korea's ultra-low birth rate. Meeting with the leaders of the 5 private economic organizations on Tuesday, Choi Kyung-won said Korea is suffering from an unprecedented low birth rate, and he expressed concern that the number of economically active people will start to decline from 2017. He pointed out that such a trend will inevitably dent Korea's growth potential. For that reason, Choi urged the corporate sector to create an environment where employees can strike a balance between work and family. Korea's birth rate is about 1.2 children per woman, one of the lowest in the world. One of Korea's largest ever sales events, K-Sale Day, wraps up today, and looking at the preliminary sales figures, it appears the event was a roaring success. The Trade and Industry Ministry says sales compared to the same period last year were up an average of 8.4% to around $450 million at the 25 retailers that took part. The vast majority of traditional markets that participated also saw their sales go up by more than 10%. The ministry says it will review the event to ensure next year is even bigger and better. The government launched the sales event in late November with about 1,000 participating stores and booths in a bid to boost consumer spending. A Korean court has made the rare move of ordering jail time for the CEO of a top conglomerate. CJ Group Chair Lee Jae-hyun has been sentenced to over 2 years in prison for misappropriating company assets. Song Ji-sun reports.
CJ Group Chairman Lee Jae-hyun has been sentenced to 2.5 years in prison and handed a fine of $21 million for embezzlement, tax evasion, and breach of trust. The food and entertainment tycoon was sentenced to 4 years in jail in 2013 for misappropriating $140 million in company assets to offshore slush funds and dodging taxes in the process. The following year, an appeals court cut the jail term to 3 years, and then this year, the Supreme Court returned the case to the local court and asked it to reconsider the heavy sentence. When Lee was indicted, the judge said in his ruling that Lee had committed the crimes to increase his personal assets and that even conglomerate owners must be punished for their misdeeds. Conglomerate owners in Korea have often been excused to manage their businesses and thus contribute to the economy, with judges giving them light punishment such as probation instead of prison time. Former SK Group Chairman Choi Tae-won is the only Jeopard owner to be imprisoned before he was pardoned by President Park Geun-hye this year, with another 1.5 years to go on his 4-year sentence. Lee has been hospitalized for the past 2 years after undergoing a kidney transplant, so he has yet to serve any jail time. CJ Group is reportedly seeking a successor for the chairman, as it appears he will not be returned to work anytime soon. The group's revenue inched up just 4% last year to $23 billion, falling from its annual double-digit growth prior to Lee's absence. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Korea's Transport Ministry has released the results of its annual safety test of new cars. Hyundai Motors' executive class sedan, the Aslan, came out on top. Other local models also fared well, with all but one being awarded the highest safety grade. Kwon Jang-ho brings us this report.
12 cars released in Korea for 2015 have been put through a series of demanding tests to see which models are the safest. The tests look at the safety of both driver and passengers, as well as how safe the vehicles are for pedestrians. They also look at driving-related safety issues, such as braking and the likelihood of a rollover. The car that came out on top was the 2015 Hyundai Aslan, with a score of 97.3 out of 100, the highest in the test's 3-year history. A Grade 1 safety award was also given to the Infiniti Q50, the Ssangyong Tivoli, and 5 other models. The Tivoli was also rated as the safest car for the relatively low price. A Grade 2 was awarded to the Mini Cooper and the Hyundai Grandeur HEV, the only Korean car not to be in the top tier. The Ford Taurus and the Volkswagen Polo had the ignominy of being given this year's lowest marks. The Taurus was ranked especially low on the pedestrian safety tests. The ministry concluded that although safety standards have gone up on average, it's still the more expensive cars that have the better safety grades, leaving customers who are on a budget with few choices when picking out cars with safety in mind. The ministry has also promised to expand the test criteria in the future so it can keep up with the latest cutting-edge technology in car safety. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
December is a month packed with year-end gatherings, and in Korea, these events often involve lots of drinking. Some Korean may want to fill their cup with something non-alcoholic, as even small amounts of the substance can be dangerous for a sizable proportion of the population, apparently. Son Jung-in shares with us the surprising discovery.
According to Kang Bo-seung, professor of emergency medicine at Hanyang University Guri Hospital, roughly 40% of people of East Asian descent, including people from Korea, China, and Japan, experience flushed cheeks, nausea, or drowsiness after drinking alcohol. That's because many Asians have an inactive variant of the enzyme that is normally responsible for breaking down alcohol. People with the enzyme deficiency who drink put themselves at risk for a heart attack or a blood clot in the brain, so they should avoid alcohol completely. Kang's report was published in the U.S. Journal of Neurology, and it was issued to refute an earlier study by local researchers. Last month, a team of neurologists at Seoul National University Hospital in Bundang released a report that said drinking 3 to 4 shots of soju reduced the risk of stroke for men by around 50%. Kang claimed that the study overlooked the genetic difference between Westerners and East Asians in the body's ability to break down alcohol. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
And we've come to the end of our newscast. As always, thank you for watching.